Welcome to the IDPro Show, your new hub for hearing about how to grow your career in digital identity. I'm Heather Flanagan, Executive Director of IDPro.
I'm Chris Cochran from AKI Identity, and we're here to introduce you the world of experts inside of identity. Whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just starting your journey in the digital identity arena, this is the show that's going to be your gateway to those trends, knowledge, and career advice.
That's right. So we're here today with the one, the only Ian Glazer. Ian is currently the founder. There's only one, thank goodness, because you're too awesome to be more than one. So Ian is currently the founder and president of Weave Identity. That's an advisory services firm. But before founding Weave, Ian was the senior vice president for identity product management at Salesforce. His responsibilities included leading the project management team, product strategy, and identity standards work. Now, earlier in his career, Ian was a research vice president and agenda manager on the identity and privacy strategies team at Gartner, where he oversaw the entire team's research. But perhaps most near and dear to our hearts, Ian is a board emeritus member and the co-founder of IDPro, and he's continuing to this day to work to deliver more services and value to the IDPro membership, raise funds for the organization, and just help identity management professionals learn from one another.
But wait, there's more. He's also on the board of directors, member and co-founder of the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation, or DIAF, focusing on removing financial barriers to participation for digital identity industry. During his career in the identity industry, he has co-authored a patent on federated user provisioning, co-authored and contributed to user provisioning specifications, and is a noted blogger, speaker, and photographer of his socks. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I want to hear your favorite story about how you got started working in the field of digital identity.
So I got my start in technology out of college at Oracle. I was a sales engineer. So we would go in, and this is back in the day where people still did benchmarks for databases. And so we would go in and do really in-depth proof of concepts to help the customer with the technology. And I came through a training program, which was unbelievable. 6 months of training. They made us do practicals and real hands-on, all this really great training. And so the cadre of us that would go through them every year became really close. And someone who had come through the program after me was like, oh, I was just asked to install this directory service, and it's the only piece of software that ever made me cry. I'm like, oh, challenge accepted. So I wrestled with what was Oracle's first directory implementation, which I believe at the time was called Oracle Internet Directory. Got the dang thing installed, and then went, what the hell do I do with it? And then sort of shrugged my shoulders and went on my way. Flash forward like a year or two, and I find myself at a user provisioning company. I'm like, oh, that's what that was for. So I literally found my way into identity through directory services, as many of us did. However, in the worst possible way of just trying to make it run, and then sort of shrug my shoulders because I didn't get the use case, because I was also young and dumb at the time. And now I'm just dumb. So that's how I got into identity, was just really hard software to install. I don't know. Have things changed out there? I hope so.
And what made you stay in identity?
Problems are visceral. We all can feel when identity stuff goes off the rails, whether it's in a workforce situation or just being an average citizen, both as a citizen and interacting with government, but interacting with any service, whether it's brick and mortar or it's online. I liked the ubiquity of the problem space. It really spoke to me. I think over time, what I came to also, and in some regards almost more enjoy, was the people that I met. The experiences that I had through working in identity, getting to see, honestly, getting to see countries I never thought I would go to, getting to meet people I never thought I would meet, and then finding out those people were awesome, right? And not just sort of scary people up on stage. I fell in love with all of that. And it continues to be the case.
Love it. We're glad you stayed because you've given so much back to the world of identity, and you've written so many body of knowledge articles. We're going to link those in the show notes wherever people are listening or watching this. But the one we wanted to ask you about is admin time. How did that particular article come about?
So, and Heather, check my math here. That was not in the first batch of body of knowledge articles, was it?
It was in the first year. It was initially published in 2020.
So the body of knowledge, IDPro's Body of Knowledge, which is a free resource anyone can use for personal use, came out of a need that we identified to make sure that people could have vendor neutral training materials. And one of the things that I knew from my time as being an analyst is people don't necessarily, certainly analysts at the time, didn't want to write, that worked for me, did not want to write what we called the meat and potatoes articles. The very most fundamental basics of identity. Those weren't just exciting to analysts. And I totally understood that. And so we worked a way that everyone could do some of that and then do some of the things that were maybe more bleeding edge. When it came to the body of knowledge, I knew the exact same was going to happen. Like people are going to want to write about these more advanced topics. But the reality is that we needed the fundamentals documented. So the admin time document, which was the Introduction to Identity Admin Time, part 1, came out of fine, I'll do the meat and potato stuff. I'll do the boring stuff. One, because I know I could do it pretty quickly. Like there was just an efficiency of like, I can just get this out of my head and write it down really fast. And 2, there is a real need, but it was an unsexy need. And I'm happy to shoulder that work to help move things along because, that's where that came from, was just a desire of like, hey, let's put a stone down that we can build on top of, but knowing that like, yeah, it's not exciting, but not everything I work on just has to be the exciting stuff. Some of the most satisfying things are the foundational pieces, right? The things that other people build on and learn from. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah. And so what prompted that specific article about admin time? And what is admin time for anybody that might be watching that's new to the field?
Yeah. So the concept of admin time is pretty simple, which is you've all experienced it in one form or another. You start a new job, let's say, and before you go to work or just get your first login, the admin is going to do some form of setup work for you. So that could be entering you into HR after HR does its work and then say, he starts in a month. Great. That may actually kick off some user provisioning events with some birthright access to be assigned. After you get that access, then that's more of the ongoing sort of quarterly access review, those kinds of things. All of that sort of work is tied into what we call admin time. Essentially, it is work that the administrator does or prompts to help set up and maintain access. In contrast to runtime, which is typically at login, something's going to happen. You're going to be prompted for MFA. You may get some additional rights. Who knows? And so back when we wrote that, which now that I say that out loud, I think is 5 or 6 years ago, the world for a long time in the market had been admin time, which is identity governance and administration, had been typically linked. And then runtime, which was typically access management, which term is now drifted out of strict sort of alignment, let's say, to some definitions. And what's really fun is, and I just wrote about this last week, is now we have an opportunity to really do things in event time. So like signals that can be processed while you're still in session, when things happen in the environment. So laying down that admin time sort of foundational stone was important because a lot of work that identity teams do is around access request, access provisioning. Let's get that done and dusted and documented.
I love it. Absolutely love it. What I love about identity, just for context, so I started in intelligence and I made my way to cybersecurity, been in cybersecurity for 20 years or so. But what I love about identity is it's not just a security thing. It's not just an IT thing. It traverses both ways. What do you think are some of the complexities that people need to think about when it comes to coming into identity for someone that's brand new to the space?
A lot of the really great minds in identity that I know and have the honor to work with and work near have totally random backgrounds, right?
Mhm.
There is no singular printing press for identity practitioners. And I think that in and of itself is an important observation. Because the identity problems are so ubiquitous, having a multidisciplinary approach to the problem is actually really important, because it then helps you understand, look, I came out of the security world and I have a comfort level with the way people talk about controls and risk and mitigation. What can I bring to this story? Or I've got an interest in privacy. I may not have a background in it, but I know that we as identity practitioners have custodial interest in really personal information and distribution of attributes about individuals. How can I bring my privacy interest to that? I think the thing that I would tell someone coming into this space is, don't worry about all the abbreviations and the acronyms and the names. We love them. We love them so much, and we love our definitions, and we love lots of definitions, to the point that if the three of us, if someone was to ask the three of us, hey, what does X mean? Between the three of us, we come up with like 5 definitions and then violently argue that they were all right at the same time. So what I would tell a new person is like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
If you're just starting, learn a product, right? You're going to learn a product in your spare time. Learn the discipline that lives in. Maybe you're starting with a single sign-on system. Maybe you're starting with a user provisioning system. Learn a little bit more about that admin time. What does like joiner, mover, leaver processes mean? Sort of try to zoom away from the product as you can. And what you'll learn is like, oh, I get this sort of tranche of identity management. And I know that my peers over there, they're working on the SSO part. And so that's where these things are a part of. Like, you start to get the picture for the larger terrain. It is I would say a majority of the people that I know of who are super successful in identity started in one little place on a product and then sort of zoomed out and zoomed out and zoomed out and started to learn the whole story, if you will. And that's reflected, at least it's strongly hinted at, in IDPro's skills survey we do year over year. One of the questions we ask is, where do you have experience? And there are 5 or 6 items that a preponderance of respondents, easily over 80%, 70 to 80%, all have. And it's like user provisioning, and it's SSO, and it's authentication, and a couple others. Because you're going to end up bumping into dabbling in those things. So if you start to learn the general practice independent of product, you get a picture for that larger world.
That's exactly how in a way I started. I mean, I'm one of those people with a diverse background, with an undergraduate major of medieval English history, a graduate degree in library science, and what got me started, didn't even know I was going down the path of digital identity, but fell into being a Galacticom bulletin board system operator, immediately followed by a Unix system operator with SunOS 4.1.3. I'm old. But all of that was getting you to the point of just understanding how a system worked, and the fact that you needed to control who saw what, because otherwise bad things would happen. Breaking that down, just at that start as a baby sysadmin, everything has been built on that over the last 30 years.
My sysadmin stuff started with Novell 3.1.1. Not even 3.1.2, but 3.1.1. And then I took a left turn into IBM's AIX and never fully recovered. So
no, no one recovers from AIX.
Yeah.
You just no.
The keyboards are awesome, though. This is why I have the world's clickiest keyboards, is because I got addicted to like keyboards that could be used as home defense weapons.
Right.
They could be used as a blast shield. I think they have them on the space shuttle as like heat tiles. Like, they're a multi-purpose device. And yeah, I'm stuck with really heavy keyboards because of it.
Click, click, click.
Mean it. Click like you mean it. Type like you mean it.
All right, so I got a question for you. We're talking about having that background of understanding the admin time of things, understanding that evolves into runtime side of things. Do you find that people tend to really enjoy one over the other? Do they start diverging in paths in terms of people that just all they want to do is live in admin time, or all they want to do is live in runtime?
It sort of depends on outcomes in some ways. And the reason why I say that is I've known people with deep identity governance and administration experience, and they stay there because they can feel satisfied in delivering the components that someone needs to be productive. Right? And there's a group of folks that are sort of really work there. Some of them come from a help desk background. In fact, our co-conspirator in IDPro, Sarah, came out of higher education and that kind of world. And so it's very satisfying, right? Because it's I'm just trying to do my job. I'm just trying to get to the thing. Help me get to the thing, right? I get that, right? That's a really good feeling. I know other people that come at identity like, I'm really interested in the way the protocols work, especially the ones where it's single sign-on brokering, but it's for apps and it's under these circumstances. And they like, and I mean this in actually the best way possible, the plumbing, right? How do we make these things work together and translate these bits into those bits so it all works? Like, that is also compelling. So I think some people do find hey, this is the part of this world I really like to dwell in. I grew up a provisioning person, and I was like, the single sign-on guys, how hard could it be? Flash forward, I'm like, whoa, okay, yeah, I didn't realize how hard it could be, and it's only getting harder. I think the thing that's interesting about identity for me is that it's constantly growing and changing. So another classic IDPro skill survey question is, how long does it take you to feel proficient? Not be proficient, but feel proficient on identity management. And over the years, roughly speaking, the number of respondents who said, I actually don't feel proficient, is about 25% of respondents. And that response, some people, won't name names yet, found like, oh my God, that's horrible. And I'm like, no, that's great. That's a growth mindset in a growing industry, right? I'm one of those 25%. I don't feel proficient. Why? Because just when I think I've got one thing nailed down, there's two more things to learn about. Yeah. And that to me is very energizing. Thank heavens I don't have to deploy all of that stuff, or maybe I would have a very different opinion in the matter. But the opportunities that it continues to present to learn, even if your enterprise isn't working on it, but just to learn about it, to me, that's really energizing, right? Now in what I do, it allows me to look with broader, sort of wider vision across the industry and say like, hey, I don't know about this over here. I want to go learn about that thing and see who I can help in the process. And so to me, that's in allowing me to continue to do what I've been doing in a domain I like for a longer than I would have expected time period.
I love you talked about how things change. I love you talked about how people are, coming into the space and they're acclimating and they're learning something. I even love the fact that you mentioned learning product first, because I mean, that's definitely one of the ways to do it, is learn a product and then learn the processes and the ideologies behind that thing. And I think about cybersecurity. When I got into cybersecurity, it almost seems simplistic today, because now you have this wide breadth of technologies and different domains that people are having to learn. You can't be an expert in all of them. It's just impossible. And so I would say that it's probably similar in the identity space. But from your perspective, from when you started in identity till now, what has changed the most? And then beyond that, what do you see ripe for disruption in the future for new innovations?
You're gonna make it the two-part question? Yikes. Okay, so part one, the thing that changed the most, to me, the opportunity to be not a cost center, but a profit center and an engine for digital experience, that to me is the biggest change. So really here we're talking about customer identity and access management and beyond, right? When I started, that wasn't really a thing. It's like if you had an online service, you had login, the end.
Mm-hmm.
But now the experience someone has going through sign up, going through sign in, going through your failure flows, those are both a security conversation, right? How do we protect what that is, as well as a digital experience and engagement question. How do we make this as smooth as possible to get the individual to the thing, the value that we, the organization, produce, and some sort of value transfer? I may be buying something. I may be turning in loyalty points. I may be getting access to social services. But it's regardless of that outcome, it is an opportunity for real engagement with an individual to help them and you derive value from that relationship. That's really different than like, hey, we need to reduce help desk call volume for password resets. So what can we do here? Right? How do we just reduce the amount of passwords we have? All very important, but they are more from a conversation of a cost center. Security as a cost, identity as a cost. Right. And IAM opens up the opportunity to say, hey, what if I can increase conversion rate and reduce churn for your organization by 10 or 15%? What does that mean dollar-wise? What does that mean from citizens reached? It means a lot. And so to me, that's probably the most interesting thing that's happened in the last decade or so. What was part two?
Part two is, what do you think is ripe for change and innovation going forward? What something has been kind of stagnant that you feel like it's time for something to be different?
Disruption for the win.
Yeah. So I've always been a little cynical about sort of the young upstarts taking on some of the really established market players. And that's more from a sort of marketplace physics perspective. But one of the things that has happened is there's real calcification going on inside of the identity industry. First consolidation and now calcification, where some fundamentals about how people do what they do have not changed in a long, long time, like 20 years in some cases. And so the way we think about consume and deploy single sign-on, user provisioning, governance, I think they're all actually ripe for some form of disruption. And if only because it shouldn't be this hard still in a lot of ways. Part one. Part two is identity has been a laggard in two key places in my mind. One is it's been a laggard in interacting with developer personas, right? Where security may have been a little bit more familiar, and like we're still under a shift left world where we're trying to bring security practices to developers. I feel like identity in a lot of ways has caught on, but hasn't been as widespread, and that needs to change. Number one. And number two is identity's not done a great job with the data that it consumes and it produces. And this enormous set of signals, of trend, of actions, all can be managed and analyzed in a different way. And this is not a new observation. So my really good friend, Lori Robinson, who Burton Group, Gartner, also Salesforce now, back in her time as an analyst was moved over to the data management side of the house because she's like, oh my gosh, us identity people, and this is like a decade ago. She's like, oh my gosh, we're not doing anything with the data that we have. We're not really managing it well. And I think what's exciting is that there's an opportunity to do more with data at modern scale. Frankly, learning from a lot of our security peers on how to do this, that's super exciting. And we're just scratching the surface of this. But that to me is super exciting. It's like, how do we think differently and manage differently the data that is both things that we are directly processing as identity practitioners, but also things we're producing, right? And what can that mean to our peers in security? What can that mean to our peers in the business? Like, that's a whole set of questions that don't have definitive answers yet because the future is being written as we speak.
Love it.
So I have a theory, and I'm going to toss it out there and see what you think about it. My theory is that, or I guess it's technically a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that us identity people are used to being a cost center and underfunded and put off to the side as necessary but not sufficient to the existence of the organization in which we work. And so we've gotten actually used to and in some ways comfortable with being important but not urgent. And so how we approach problem solving is, or better yet, standards development is, yeah, this stuff is kind of important, but it's okay for it to take years. And yet I think the world is moving to a place where no, actually it's not okay for this to take years anymore. And yet as a profession, we don't know how to move from important to urgent. What do you think?
The opportunity to shut off login to a multi-billion-dollar line of product, you can make yourself pretty darn urgent if you choose to.
You can also make yourself pretty darn unemployed, but
it worked for me for a while. So at any rate, I think maybe hiding inside of this identity security miasma is maybe a bit of that transformation. I will agree that identity teams have often been at the kids' table, so to speak. And honestly, IDPro is an offshoot of that, in the sense that where security has a variety of certifications, a variety of industry-specific events that are not necessarily just facilitated by analyst personas, and privacy has the same thing, identity didn't. Mm-hmm. And that really bugged me, right? It really bugged me that we have these practitioners who have been working, in some cases, decades at this problem space, helping their enterprises as best they can with what they got, but not having both the visibility inside the organization and the places to meet one another. That was part of the impetus for IDPro. It's why I wrote about the professionalization of identity management, that we were a practice, an offshoot of the help desk, a variety of sort of weird catch-as-catch-can organizational units. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, we knew we had the keys to the kingdom. But we weren't getting necessarily the organizational respect, airtime, et cetera, around that. And this isn't about identity practitioners sort of beating their chests. It's more about how do we put into terms that the business understands value related to what we do. And it goes back to these problems are ubiquitous, but no one thinks about how they get solved oftentimes, right? It's like, like electricity magically flows to my house. How'd that happen? Right? I can log in successfully and adversaries don't take over my account. Does anyone think about that? Not except us, right? So I think that's part of the challenge too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We got to wrap talking about Identiverse, right? It's upon us. The countdown has begun. AKI Identity is going to be there. We're going to have a booth. Obviously, IDPro is going to be there and is going to have a booth as well for people to come by. So be sure to mark your calendars. We're going to be having an IDPro meetup, which is sponsored by AKI Identity on that Wednesday, right after the Identiverse beer crawl. So be sure to drop by the booth or check out the Slack if you are already a member and learn more about what we have coming up there. So I got to ask you, Ian, what do you have cooking for Identiverse this year?
So I'm working on this deck talking about how we apply identity management for real world outcomes. But there is so much stuff going on at Identiverse. I happen to be on the content committee, and I'm part of a group that's looking after a professional development track. There are some really great talks coming up about how does one think about strategic leadership and identity. There is a wonderful masterclass on techniques to helping you be more relevant to the business and learning about how to really question in a way that leads to mutual outcome. So stoked about the professional development track. And then in addition to that, you mentioned DIAF in the beginning, Digital Identity Advancement Foundation. we're really focused, as you said, about removing financial barriers to participation for identity management. It's not everyone's got a budget to come to a conference, especially people just starting out. So DIAF has the privilege of looking after something called the Kim Cameron Award, and it honors Kim's amazing career in identity management. And we have awarded 5 awardees, 2 of which will be coming to Identiverse. And I get the honor of introducing them to the entire identity world and more, talk about what we do, but help new people meet more people and get started in this industry, because the problem is only growing and we need all hands. If we can get them, then the more the merrier. So I'm really excited for the DIAF work as well. And Weave Identity will be there. We have a mobile booth. It's mostly just me. I will probably be sitting by the Starbucks in between the 2 wings of the hotel. Come by and say hi.
So I'm also going to be doing the newcomers session, which will kick things off on Tuesday.
You're doing the newbies?
Me and Alan Foster are doing the newbies.
Oh my gosh. If you've just found this episode and you're just hearing about this and you're at Identiverse, you have to go to this because it is a welcoming, gracious experience to actually meet your peers and meet this mammoth event all in one. So I cannot stress enough. Tuesday afternoon, I don't know the time off the top of my head, but I do know I land just a couple of hours before it, and I will be headed there too.
Fantastic. Ian, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for taking time out of your busy schedule to hop on the mics with us. If you're going to be there at Identiverse, please track us down. We love speaking to everybody out there in the identity world. And be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this, because we are going to continue to bring you more stories from the world of identity. And with that, we will see everyone next time.